Hello, class. In this video, or in this lecture, I guess, we're going to discuss concision. So as you should remember from your previous technical communication classes, concision involves making your writing more concise, making it more palatable, shortening the length of your writing for the better. So really what you're doing with concision is you're trying to make things easier for people to understand in a fewer amount of words, and also make it so that it's very clear what it is that you're trying to say. So that's the goal of the video today. Now we won't be able to share this, though I do it in my other class. So I won't be able to share this with you here, but basically this is a link to a video that you should watch because I think it's pretty useful for this lecture, but also kind of fun. So it's a video of Kevin from The Office where he decides that he's going to start saying things in as few words as possible, which leads him to sound somewhat like a caveman, or the idea of what we think cavemen talk like in movies and television. And so basically in this approach, he's just decided he's going to save time by removing all of what he views are the unnecessary words. So really, this is an effort for concision, right? Like he's removing words just to make it shorter, which making writing shorter is some of the point of concision, if it makes sense for that particular communication that it actually be shorter. Because sometimes you might be trying to decrease the length, but also sometimes you're just trying to decrease or change the words to make it easier for the reader to understand. So according to, or not your text, but technical communication texts, concise writing conveys the most information in the fewest words possible. And basically the idea is to use fewer words when fewer will do, which is similar to what Kevin does in the video that I hope you all will watch. So some common concision errors include things like wordy phrases where people will say things like as of late, where it could be changed to lately. Do damage to, which could just be damage. During the course of, which could just be during. So wordy phrases really kind of get in the way of what you're trying to say, because people have to think of these combinations of words and then apply that to the rest of the sentence, right? So if you're trying to you say as of late, it lengthens the sentence, but it also takes more work for the person reading it to figure out that what you really mean is lately. Redundancy is another concern with concision, and that includes things that are phrases that we pretty constantly or pretty consistently use that really are just redundant. So if you take things like added bonus, close proximity, fewer in number, future plans joined together, and the other things that are listed there, you're basically saying the same thing twice, and it adds no clarity to the sentence, and it doesn't make it more concise, and really is just redundant. For instance, instead of saying large in size, you can just say large, and people will understand within the context of the sentence that you mean large relates to size, right? So you don't have to save, or you don't have to include all of those words when you could save some space and save some time and not include them. And then the last one is needless repetition, which are things like pollution is threatening life on the planet. Pollution could kill all living things. Pollution also threatens all humans. So you have these three different sentences that you could modify and then make it into one cohesive sentence that isn't quite so choppy. And so we'll talk about that in this lecture. So concision, really, as we're talking about, includes wordiness, it includes all those things, but these are two kind of ridiculous signs that demonstrate what the world would be like if we weren't concise. So if you look at the sign on the left, maximum legally permissible strength of velocity forward progress, which really just means speed limit, right? And then the one on the right is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know if it's real, but anyway, I thought it was amusing, so I included it in here. But this would be an idea of what concision can really do for you, because you can have something that's really palatable in a small number of words that's very clear for what the reader wants. So as an example, sentence one, Linda's friend is a woman who is unhappy because of the fact that her kids do not clean up their messes. So I think that we can all agree that this is entirely too many words, and it could be stated in a much more concise way. And so an improved sentence might be, Linda's friend is unhappy because her kids do not clean, right? So instead of saying Linda's friend is a woman, first of all, it doesn't matter if she's a woman or not, but also it's just irrelevant to the sentence, right? And then who is unhappy because of the fact that. So Linda is obviously a person, so it's clear that she is unhappy because of the fact that, which really is just because, and her kids do not clean up their messes, which it kind of says that because her kids do not clean up their messes, it means that they do not clean. So you can remove a whole bunch of those words there and say exactly the same thing in a lot more concise way. Wordy phrases is also a problem, which we've discussed already to some extent. And so you have phrases like due to the fact that, which really is just because, the majority of, which is really just most, readily apparent, which is really just obvious, a large number, which is really many, aware of the fact that, which is really just no, in the course of, during, with the exception of, except. So you can see there that we've got all of these terms that we use frequently that are really just wasted words. It's just extremely wordy phrasing that's challenging for people to read and understand. And when you can change something like with the exception of to just except, it makes it a lot easier for everybody involved. So redundancy is one of the other things we'll talk about. So some redundant phrases include things like completely eliminate, enter into, end result, utter devastation, the month of August, and few in number. So obviously, if you're talking about August, especially within the context of a sentence, most people will automatically know that you're talking about the month of August, so it's clear. You just say August. Few in number, few always relates to number. There's never anything else that few relates to that I can think of. Right, so all of these are just redundant phrases that you can remove one of the words or multiple words if it's a longer phrase, and be a lot more concise with what you want to say. So repetition is also, especially needless repetition, because repetition is positive. We've discussed this in class a few times. It's okay to repeat ideas or to repeat yourself if it's going to benefit the audience. But frequently, it's not helpful. It just makes things choppy, and then people get bored or they just don't understand what you're trying to say. So from a communication textbook, in trauma victims, breathing is restored by artificial respiration. Techniques of artificial respiration include mouth-to-mouth respiration and mouth-to-nose respiration. So there's already, as you can see there, you mentioned artificial respiration, mouth-to-mouth respiration, and mouth-to-nose respiration. So it's clear there that you're talking about respiration. So you could modify that to say something like, in trauma victims, breathing is restored by artificial respiration, either to mouth or mouth-to-nose. And so you say exactly the same thing in a lot fewer words. It's more interesting to read, and it's clearer to the person that's actually reading them. And again, repetition is okay if you're reminding the reader of a topic or to clarify your message. Just make sure that you use it wisely, because repeating an idea is not the same as just repeating the same words over and over again or writing choppy sentences that are not easy for your reader. Using strong verbs is a great way to make your writing not just seem more important, but to make sure that you're using words that people will respect and that they will decide makes your reading or your writing worth reading. So instead of saying things like, please take into consideration my offer, you could use, please consider my offer. Instead of saying things like, the book was written by Stephen King, you can just say, Stephen King wrote the book. And then instead of human resources recommendation is for a larger budget, you could say human resources recommends a higher salary or a higher budget, I guess would be the right word there. So you can see that we've taken these long phrases and instead you make them a lot more direct, and using the strong verbs versus the weak verbs makes your writing easier for people to understand, and also helps you to clarify the message that you're trying to get across to your reader. So nominalizations are a problem because they take a verb and then they turn it in, or it takes a noun and then it turns it into a verb. So how this works is you've got a word like cooperate, right? So it's a verb. We are going to cooperate. Your group is cooperating, right? Whenever you make that into a noun, instead it becomes cooperation. Sometimes it's fine to say things like cooperation, or to change words like consider into consideration, fail into failure, right? There's times that that's okay. But whenever you start stacking all of these nominalizations onto each other, it creates extra length to your sentences, and it also requires you to do more work to say the thing that you want to say. So again, just as a review, nominalizations change nouns, or change verbs and turn them into nouns, which make them harder to understand than the verbs themselves. All right, so these sentences have nominalizations, and we'll go through these and I'll kind of explain what ways to improve them are. So you start out with sentences like ecosystem destabilization can be the consequence of invasion, right? So you've got your ecosystem, it's been destabilized, but we've changed destabilized into destabilization. And it can be the consequence of invasion, which used to be the verb invade, right? So if we take all of that into consideration, which consideration is a nominalization, but then you can shorten that sentence and say invasion can destabilize ecosystems. So we've moved that entire sentence now into 4 words that mean exactly the same thing and are much clearer to the person reading them. And you can see that invasion is left there, and destabilize has moved from being a nominalization into the verb that it was intended to be. All right, second sentence, the committee conducted an interrogation of the subject, which you could just say the committee interrogated the subject, and then you remove all of those nominalizations and you make it much clearer who is doing the action and what is happening there. All right, the next one, our plan was to go running, but our cute dogs were a distraction. That could be changed into, we planned to run, but our dogs distracted us. And then the last one, the first computer's build was done by Dell, and the second build was done by Alienware, which is a very clunky sentence, where you're changing build, you're changing built into build, and you're making that into a noun that doesn't need to be a noun. All right, so if you change that and you make Dell and Alienware the actor of the sentence, it becomes Dell built the first computer and Alienware built the second one, and you're saying the same thing, and it's much easier for people to understand. So the last thing we'll touch on is excessive preposition. So a preposition shows the relationship between a noun or pronoun to another word in the sentence. So it includes things like up, down, across, into, by. So there's a lot of different prepositions that exist just generally. But a prepositional phrase is a modifying phrase that consists of a preposition and its subject. So let's build a sentence. So you start out with David went, right? That's a complete sentence. You have a noun, then you have a verb. So then we're going to change that and we're going to say where David went, right? So David went to work. Then you can add another preposition and say David went to work in his car. You can add another one and say David went to work in his car on Monday. You can add even another one where David went to work in his car on Monday with his friend. You can literally keep adding preposition on preposition on preposition, and technically your sentence is correct, but it's also very difficult for people to understand. And then you can also figure out ways that is going to make your sentence much easier to understand. Also, sometimes whenever you start adding in a lot of prepositions, you're just adding in information that doesn't need to be there. Like, it is going to be a very challenging situation that somebody needs to understand that David went to work in his car on Monday with his friend. Very few people care about that amount of detail, right? So whenever you start to stack all these prepositional phrases on top of each other, it just makes your sentence much more difficult to read. Again, we're not telling you don't use prepositions. It's just that you should use prepositions wisely and make sure that you're using them in the way that you need to. So closing out this lecture, the point is to listen to Kevin, kind of, right? So if you go back, if you watch that YouTube video, he has a point that you don't need to say all of the words that you normally say, or you don't need to write all of the words that you normally write. However, make sure that you're still getting your point across and you're still being as concise as you possibly can be. So thanks for listening to this. There are going to be other videos here about clarity and also about fluency, so make sure that you watch those. And I hope this helps improve your writing, or at least making you a little bit more comfortable with your writing. But I'm here, I'm happy to help. Again, connect with me through email, connect with me through Zoom, and I will be ready and willing to help you out as you continue writing for this class. All right, thanks everyone.